As of Season 3, we now know about all members of the 12 Kizuki. But what exactly makes them tick? Let's find out. Today we will go over each member of the 12 Kizuki and explain each of their backstories. Let's get started. The first member of the lower moons we met is technically Kyogai, the demon Tanjiro fought in the Tsuzumi Manor. Before becoming a demon, Kyogai was an aspiring writer, although someone in his life was incredibly critical of his work. This person tells Kyogai that he's become isolated and boring. When this unknown person leaves, he steps on a piece of paper containing Kyogai's writing. This caused Kyogai to fly into a rage and kill the other person. Kyogai is one of the only demons to have been kicked out of the 12 Kizuki on account of him being too weak for Muzan standards. The next member of the 12 Kizuki that Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke encounter is Rui, and his spider family on Mount Natagumo. He's the first of the lower six to get a fully fleshed out backstory. When he was a human, Rui was a frail child affected by an unknown disease. Most of his childhood was spent at his home surrounded by his parents. Despite the love of his parents, Rui desperately wanted a normal body. So when Muzan Kibutsuji appeared before him, Rui accepted his offer to become a demon. At first, Rui was grateful for his new, strong body. However, this didn't last long. As a demon, Rui had to consume human flesh to survive. When his parents found out about this, they tried to kill their son. In his own defense, Rui killed them. Rui was racked with grief and guilt after this. He only fell further into his demonic impulses and followed Muzan and became one of the lower moon, known as number 5. He attempted to build a family for himself by giving other demons his spider powers and treating them like members of his family. His goal was to make a family that would never betray him like he thought his real family did. The next few lower moons we don't know that much about. After Rui had been killed, Muzan got a bit frustrated with how often he had to replace the lower 6. So he killed numbers 6, 4, 3, and 2. Although they did have names. They were named Kamanue, Mukago, Wakurabo, and Rokuro. The only member of the lower 6 that Muzan spared was lower rank 1, Onmu. If you remember, he's the main antagonist of the first half of Mugen Train. All of Onmu's powers revolve around dreams, and so does his backstory. As a child, Onmu had trouble telling reality and dreams apart. Then, when he was older, Onmu began scamming people by pretending to be a doctor. He used hypnotic techniques to trick sick people into thinking he was curing them. One night, Muzan attacked Onmu on a passing whim, and he was transformed into a demon. After becoming lower rank 1, Onmu became incredibly loyal to Muzan, which is why he was spared when Muzan massacred the rest of the lower moons. He accepted his fate and asked Muzan to kill him. Impressed by his loyalty, Muzan gives him a power-up. So that covers the lower 6. But there's still 6 more members of the 12 Kizuki to go. If you're enjoying this so far, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And be sure to hit the bell icon to make sure you never miss one of our videos. Anyway, let's move on to the upper moons now. Starting with the demonic siblings who share the rank of upper 6, Daki and Gyutaro. Let's start with the older sibling. Gyutaro was born Daki's older brother and had always been incredibly protective of her. It should be noted that Gyutaro isn't his actual name, just one he made up for himself. Gyu is a word for people who would entice customers into the entertainment district, which was his job, while Taro is a common suffix in Japanese names. Both Daki and Gyutaro grew up in the entertainment district together, and life for them wasn't exactly easy. Their mother was killed by a disease, and eventually Daki went to work for a high-class brothel in the entertainment district. Her goal was to eventually become an oiran, the highest-ranking class of courtesans. However, Daki's life as a courtesan came to an end when she was attacked by one of her customers. Daki was set on fire and left for dead, but she was still alive after being burned. Gyutaro ended up killing the samurai who attacked his sister and the manager of the brothel Daki worked at. As Daki was dying, both siblings were approached by a demon named Doma. We'll get back to him later though. Doma took pity on the siblings and decided to turn the two of them into demons together. In their new demonic life, Daki and Gyutaro terrorized the entertainment district and eventually became the upper rank 6 together. These two were the main antagonists of the entertainment district arc. Now we'll begin moving on to the 2 members of the 12 Kizuki featured in the Swordsmith Village arc. So be warned of spoilers for both Season 3 and the manga moving forward. But if you've watched this far and liked the video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. The first of the upper 6 that appears in Swordsmith Village is upper rank 5, Gyoko. You may have noticed by his appearance, but Gyoko sort of has a fish theme going on. Well, that also carries over into his backstory. His name when he was still a human was Managi, and as a child, he grew up in a small coastal village. Growing up, his parents went out on a boat and never returned. It was a young Gyoko who eventually discovered their dead bodies on the beach sometime later. This event clearly did something to Gyoko. Since that day, the young boy had a fascination with death. He was often seen playing with dead fish. When another local boy teased Gyoko for his behavior, Gyoko killed him in a rage and shoved his body into a vase. When the other villagers found the boy, they blamed Gyoko and attacked him with a fishing spear, leaving him for dead. But as he lay there, Gyoko was approached by Muzan Kibutsuji and transformed into a demon. Gyoko's partner throughout the Swordsmith Village arc was an elderly demon named Hantengu. He initially comes off as weak and cowardly, but we soon find out that there's a lot more to him. In his life, Hantengu was a compulsive liar and career criminal. He committed many acts of theft and murder over his long life, the whole time claiming to anyone who questioned him that he was completely innocent. After a while, Hantengu began to believe his own lies, believing that he wasn't in control of his actions anymore. This is reflected in his demon blood art, where he's able to split into multiple people. His lying got to the point where he claimed he literally couldn't control his hands and that they were committing crimes on their own. Eventually, Hantengu was captured and sentenced to be executed. However, while he was awaiting execution, Hantengu was approached by Muzan and transformed into a demon. Now, before we get to the top 3 ranks of the Upper Moons, there are 2 more demons we have to go over: Kaigaku and Nakime. Kaigaku was the newer Upper 6 meant to replace Gyutaro and Daki, while Nakime was used to replace Hantengu. You may already recognize Kaigaku. He is another student who trained alongside Zenitsu under former Hashira Jigoro Kuwajima. He was in Zenitsu's flashback in episode 17. But before that, Kaigaku was actually an orphan who lived in a temple with the stone Hashira Gyome Himejima. However, he was always a bit of a brat back then. He even was once kicked out of the temple for stealing. Kaigaku was at one point a demon slayer. However, he suffered the unfortunate fate of encountering Kokushibo, upper rank 1 of the 12 Kizuki. Kaigaku surrendered to save his own life and was turned into a demon himself. The next replacement is Nakime. You may remember she was the biwa player that was present when Muzan slaughtered the lower 6. When she was human, Nakime was an amateur musician. However, she was married to a man with a crippling gambling addiction who didn't support her dreams. One fateful night, Nakime came home to discover that her husband had gambled away her performing dress, and in a fit of rage, she murdered him. She still went to perform her biwa that night wearing ragged clothes. Despite being racked with nerves from her recent killing, the audience loved her performance. Ever since that day, Nakime had begun killing people before each of her shows to try and replicate that performance. Nakime was never caught for any of her murders, but one day she chose none other than Muzan Kibutsuji as her next victim. Muzan was impressed with Nakime's talent for searching for her prey and decided to turn her into a demon. Okay, now it's time to get to the top 3 ranks of the 12 Kizuki, starting with Akaza. As a human, he was known by the name Hakuji. Growing up, his father was terribly ill, so to afford medicine for him, Akaza resorted to theft. However, several times he was caught and branded with tattoos that marked him as a criminal. Akaza's father later hung himself when he heard about his son's criminal activity. So with no family left and marked as a criminal, Akaza began lashing out at the world around him and would often fight against anyone he could find. But one day, Akaza was taken in by a local man named Keizo who owned a dojo. Despite Akaza disliking Keizo at first, he still took the boy in. While staying with Keizo, Akaza worked as the caretaker to Keizo's sick daughter, Koyuki. After several years, Akaza had become a loyal student of Keizo's and Koyuki's condition had improved. Keizo even asked him to take over the dojo one day and offered him his daughter's hand in marriage. Things seemed to be going well for Akaza, at least until the heir to the rival dojo heard about Akaza's engagement to Koyuki. He defeated the heir and several of the dojo students, but this victory ultimately proved to be hollow. The rival dojo poisoned the well where Keizo and Koyuki drank from, and when he returned, he found them both dead. In a rage, Akaza killed every member of the rival dojo with his bare hands. So once again, Akaza had nothing left. At least until Muzan sought him out and transformed him into a demon. Next is upper rank 2, Doma. His life as a human was a bit odd to say the least. For some reason, Doma was born with white hair and rainbow-colored eyes. His parents capitalized on this by installing Doma as the head of a religion they founded called Paradise Faith. He was an incredibly intelligent child and considered both his parents and the followers of his cult to be beneath him. He never believed that the cult he was in was real or that they could reach paradise. He just went along with it. Eventually, the cult fell apart when Doma's mother discovered that her husband was having affairs with other women in the cult. She stabbed her husband to death before ending her own life, all while Doma just sat there and watched. It's not clear what happened to Doma after that, but eventually, at age 20, Doma met Muzan and became a demon. Now finally, we have the upper rank one of the 12 Kizuki, Kokushibo. He was born hundreds of years back in the Sengoku period with a twin brother named Yoriichi. Back then, twins were considered a bad omen, and because of the strange birthmark on Yoriichi's face, his father decided to kill him. However, their mother convinced their father to simply send Yoriichi away to become a priest instead. From that day on, Kokushibo and his brother lived apart. While Yoriichi prepared to become a priest, Kokushibo began training for a life as a swordsman. Yoriichi wanted to become just like his brother despite the fate his parents had given him. It turned out that Yoriichi was actually quite gifted when it came to swordsmanship, and the young Kokushibo wanted to become a fighter even more talented than his twin brother. The older they got, the more envious Kokushibo became of Yoriichi. Not only was Yoriichi physically stronger than him, but also more intelligent. Many years later, Kokushibo had become a samurai and even got married and had a pair of sons. However, one day, a demon attacked his company of samurai and left him as the only survivor. Yoriichi showed up in time to kill the demon. Still wanting to prove himself stronger, Kokushibo joined the Demon Slayer Corps. After a lot of training, Kokushibo taught himself his own style of breathing, known as moon breathing. But even after all of this, he still felt inferior to his brother. So when Muzan approached Kokushibo with offers of great power and immortality, he accepted. That covers every known member of the 12 Kizuki. What did you think? And if you'd like us to cover more in-depth powers and abilities of the 12 Kizuki, leave your comments below.